Welcome everybody to the Evernote community webinar. I am Charlotte, I am your host, and I'm very excited to announce that we have two very special guests with us today. We have Ian and Andrew. Ian is Evernote's new CEO, and Andrew is our Chief Product Officer. So we're going to do something a little different, and we're going to play a fun game called Getting to Know You. So first question, a very important question about Evernote organizational strategy. So in your own Evernote usage, where do you fall on tags, notebooks, and search?
So I get to go first, and I am probably the person who enjoys the complicated structure out there so that I have multiple ways to find everything. So I have actually created a matrix of notebooks and tags so that I can both tag everything similar to the way I tag my email, but then still organize things into notebooks based around functions. Because I find that most projects end up being led by some function, but never really completed just by that function. So we always have an analytics component of almost every project that goes on, but it's not an analytics project per se. Therefore, I can find everything by both people and project type and function.
So if you've
Sounds good.
if you've worked with Malk for a while, you will know that this makes complete sense, actually, from his standpoint. What's interesting to me is about 25 years ago when I was at Apple, we did some research into how people like to organize things. And way back then, we found that people were either filers, pilers, or searchers. And filers liked organizational schemes like hierarchical folders. Pilers essentially like to put things in piles and put labels on them, tagging. And searchers threw everything in a box, and when they needed to find it, would actually dig through it all to find what they were looking for. And the thing that was most interesting about that was it was really hard to take a filer and convince them of the merits of piling. And it was really hard to take a piler and convert them into a filer. People kind of sort of were in one camp or the other. Malk is obviously the exception. Now, what's happened over like 25 years is we've all got to love search because of the internet. But I think people are still primarily either filers or pilers. And I'm a filer. So that means I use notebooks. I'm a frustrated filer because I want hierarchy in my notebooks and I don't have it right now. But that's where I come out on the spectrum. I keep trying to use tags, and it's not the way my brain wants to work.
Yeah.
And I don't, I feel that's okay because 25 years ago, I discovered that that's how people work.
Well, that's interesting. It sounds like you've been kind of in the productivity research phase for a long time now. Well,
I didn't realize it, but clearly I started my Evernote journey 25 years ago before Stepan even realized there was an Evernote journey. So I was like ahead of the game.
Well, then that leads into our next question. How long have you guys been Evernote users?
So my Evernote journey started on my birthday in 2011 when I realized what a bad manager I was, in that I wasn't taking good notes in meetings, I wasn't following up on one-to-ones, and Evernote became my solution to that problem. And I noticed that certainly I was a better manager and things changed at work, I was getting more done, but I don't think I really came to live an Evernote way of life until about 10 months later when my dad got sick. And all of a sudden, Evernote wasn't just a very practical tool for me anymore. It was a very personal tool as well, as I was managing his medical records. And then ultimately when he passed away, his legal documents and his eulogy is written in Evernote. And that was the point where I realized how unique Evernote could be as a product and a brand to span these incredibly personal, intimate moments of my life, all the way to the thing I use every day when I wake up in the morning to figure out what I'm going to do and how I'm going to get it done. And I think that that was where it all started for me and why I'm so proud to work on it now at this point.
Yeah, that's a story that I hear from so many different individuals of just Evernote doesn't fit into a bucket for professional or personal. It's really wherever you need it to be, it does step up for you.
Evernote's an incredibly personal tool. Everything we see about people who live, as you say, an Evernote way of life, it's not a tool anybody picks for them. It's a tool they pick for themselves, a tool they carry with them everywhere in their lives. For me, my story is a little bit different because I was an early adopter of Evernote. I don't actually know when I started using Evernote. And it was just because I'm I take notes about a lot of things. Doesn't mean I was a better manager than Malk was back in 2011. Just meant I took a lot of notes, and so I used Evernote. But actually, I fired Evernote as a user in 2012.
Okay.
I was in the middle of selling a company, and I was using Evernote for all the notes about the process of selling the company. And one day in the middle of a meeting, I couldn't get access to a note that I needed access to, and Evernote had done a little bit of an oops. And that was a point in time at which Evernote had some quality problems, and I fired the app that day. And actually, I didn't come back until last year when the company started talking to me about joining Evernote. I got myself reacquainted with Evernote, and I reinstalled, and I started looking at it again. And so I think there's two answers to your question. One is either a very long time, because I don't know when I started, but it would have been kind of 2009 maybe. But the real answer is, at this point, 6 months.
Well, kind of looking at that 6 months kind of viewpoint, now when you were approached about taking the CEO role, you did do some digging into, okay, like, do I want to, get married to this product again in a more personal level in your day-to-day work? But with that, from something that you've told me, is during that time is where you actually set up these goals that you've now established as our moving forward point for 2019. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about that?
I think for me, when I first started looking at being a part of the Evernote family was, is this a product that I believe we can take somewhere? Is a product that I believe that we can start to lead the category again? This is a category that Evernote invented, 10 plus years ago. And there are a lot of people in the category today. It's not clear exactly who's leading it. We're probably the biggest. We've got the biggest software companies in the world with us now in the category. We made that happen. But we want to get this company back to the place where it can lead again. But really, to do that, we need to have a better foundation to build on. And when you sit down and you talk to people who use Evernote in their everyday lives, right now we're not necessarily living up to the promise that we make to people. And so that's why I set out these priorities that I talked about earlier in the year, which was, we want to make a more coherent, consistent experience for every Evernote user. Today, if you use Evernote on Windows, you have a very different experience than if you use it on a Mac. You have a very different experience than if you use it on the web. And again, you have a different experience between Android and iOS. And it's not that you should have the identical experience, obviously, on a small piece of glass on your phone. A mobile-first experience looks very different than a large screen experience. But it should feel like you're in the same place and in the same app, and it should be very familiar. So that's sort of the first thing we want to do is drive that. The second thing that we very much want to do is make it possible for us to get software out to the users faster and with quality. We've had some problems recently shipping with a consistent quality level. People are aware that, we'll ship a release and a bug will get fixed, and the next release we ship, the bug will get unfixed again. Right. And that's really frustrating, right? As a user, it's frustrating for us too, but our job is not to make those kinds of problems for our users. And we want to be able to ship new features out to the community at quality and with speed. And I think both of those things we've been struggling to do over the last couple of years. And the third thing we want to do is fix the infrastructure on which all of this really rests. And that's fundamentally, it's behind the scenes, it's behind the curtains of all the Evernote experience that each of us has. And yet, what happens back in the cloud, what happens with the servers, the way that is architected, that affects how fast the product is, how reliable the product is, how it scales. And ultimately, it affects our ability to ship new features out into the community that take Evernote forward. And so those three things are absolutely things that collectively, we identified in the first few months that we really need to work on in order to be able to innovate again.
Now, that's all great. And I know everyone here from some point of view kind of understands it, but can we kind of micro focus on just defining what fixing the basics means from our point of view? We've talked about it a lot from a marketing standpoint. What does it mean from a product standpoint?
Let me start and then you can chip in. I think everybody's Evernote experience is a combination of about, 6 or 7 big things and then 1,000 little things. Everybody pretty much has some familiarity with the editor, with capturing, with organizing, with sharing, right? There's these big ticket items that are the sort of core of the Evernote experience. And there's a few more, but it's not a huge number that are at kind of the core of the experience. But then there's like 1,000 little things. And, Phil Libin used to talk about the 5% problem, which is everyone has a 5% problem. We all use 5% of the product. The problem is we each use a different 5%.
Right.
And it's those 1,000 little things that makes that happen because none of us uses all 1,000 little things. I mean, I can't go to a meeting where there are Evernote users and not have an Evernote user come up with something that other people don't know the product does. And that's in that list of things. So your experience with Evernote, your personal experience with Evernote is a combination of those big things and some subset of those little things. So when I think about fixing the basics, I actually start with the big things.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make the big things work better. They need to be reliable and they need to be easier. And I think we can riff quite happily now, but we can take any of those big things and talk about making them more reliable, making them easier. We will in a second. But those 1,000 little things also are what make Evernote special. So we can't say, okay, the 1,000 little things are all incredibly important, right. But because there are 1,000 of them, there's 1,000 corners in which bugs can hide, 1,000 corners in which things can be difficult to use, 1,000 corners in which you can go, I didn't even know this was here, and if I'd known this was here, it would have changed my life. So sometimes focusing on the basics is fixing those. Sometimes it's revealing those to you. Sometimes it's about getting those things that you use sort of closer to you so the Evernote you use can be closer to you. That was kind of the general take. Do you want to... We can go back and forth on editor or sharing or anything.
Yeah, I think we could probably most usefully talk to people about the things they want to hear about in the big buckets. But when we think about the 1,000 little things, the biggest challenge about the 1,000 little things is that people actually want them to work in different ways at different times. Yes. Mm-hmm. So one of the easiest examples is there's about 50% of the population who wants to populate the note title before they go into the content. And there's about 50% of the population who wants to be able to go to the content and then write the note title after the fact. So where do you land the cursor when you open up a new note? Whoever you use to side with.
Which is so simple.
It seems like a very, very simple thing, right? But that is one that takes off at least half the population based on the choice you make. And so one of the ways...
But that's an example of something that over time we could fix. Because over time we could say, well, if every time you open a note, you tab out of the note title and you just start typing into the note, then, after a while we could say, oh, you're in the 50% that wants to start in the note.
And it turns out that a lot of those people who want to start in the note are on mobile, and the people who want to start in the title are usually doing something more complicated on desktop. So we are learning about this. And one of the big chunks that Ian didn't mention there is the profile, how a user profile can be customized to the way that they want to be able to use Evernote. And we're investing just as hard in the ability to do that as we are more of the maybe publicly facing things that you might think about around an editor experience. Because we do know that for those people who have now thousands of notes, we have built our systems into Evernote, and we need to abide by that in our commitment that we don't break those things as we go.
That's great. So something to kind of even think about from more of how tech companies are building product and the hard questions around that at 10 years, which congrats, we made it 10 years. But now with Ian, you stepping in, and Andrew, you taking over product, you guys have had to make the hard choice of choosing product foundational health over feature innovation. What are the reasons that you guys did choose that, and what are some of the hard choices that you had to make to push forward with that?
Do you want to go first? Do you want to take that?
Yeah. So I don't think it's kind of a false dichotomy to say you choose one or the other, right? You choose one for a period of time, basically, so you can do the other one way faster. I think if I put myself in our user shoes, I'm as frustrated as anybody about some of the things that haven't gotten improved over the last 3 or 4 years. And the reason they haven't gotten improved is we've effectively built Evernote 5 times. And we need to go about figuring out how we build it one time and we can ship it multiple times. And as soon as we do that, then we're going to be able to focus on those innovations. And not just like the big things, but those 1,000 little things too that people want to see improve as we go. It's not an easy call. And I all respect in the world to the man who made the decision to say, for 6 months, we are going to go about building the foundation upon which we will improve everything after that. And that's our commitment right now. And it's not like we're not working as hard as we ever have to have that ready and done as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think, it's like if you watch sports, you see athletes sometimes go out and they have an injury and then they try to come back and they get injured again. They try to come back and they get injured again. Sometimes when you have an injury, the right thing to do is to go off the field, spend the time rehabbing, let the injury heal properly, because that's the fastest way for you to get back on the field playing at your full potential, right? We created this category by innovating. The very idea of Evernote was a massive innovation at the time it was created. And to lead this category again and to take it to the places that we fully believe it can go and it can start to change your life in a way that we haven't done before, we need to innovate again. But you can't innovate on top of a foundation that's a little bit rickety, a little bit unreliable, that's kind of running out of scale room and all those kinds of things. And there's a truth to the fact that we've been around 10 years. We have the biggest user base in the business. But as a result of that, those are all constraints for us. And right now for us, the answer is we need a more solid foundation so that we can innovate. Again, to me, it's not either or, it's one, then the other. And for the last, 2 years, we've been fighting our foundation. We have been shipping things from time to time, and they've been incredibly hard for us to ship. And we need to get to a place where we're not fighting the foundation anymore. The foundation is actually accelerating us. And I believe this choice to do one before we do the other means that as we start to innovate again towards the end of this year and the beginning of 2020, we're going to move at a speed that you haven't seen Evernote move at in a long time.
Yeah. So I love what you guys said about innovation isn't one or the other, because product improvement is product innovation, if you really think about it, and more of feature innovation. I have worked at Evernote for a number of years, and I like to think of us kind of stepping out of that awkward teenager phase. We're no longer a startup. We went through the weird growing pains, and now we're trying to get past it into a really adult company that does move quickly, makes smart and succinct decisions.
The fact of the matter is we invest more in development than anybody else in our space. But you don't see that as a user.
It's not a fun story.
Because it's so much work for us to ship the things that we ship. And there's no reason we shouldn't be able to go a lot faster than we're going. But you don't get there simply by saying, go faster. You have to figure out, where is all the sand in the gears that's built up in this machine we've built over 10 years? And there's a lot of sand in the gears. And we have to knock all the sand out. And that's really what this is about.
Cool. Well, I guess the only question there is, what are you guys excited about building in the next couple months?
So, the list of things I'm excited about is long and sometimes a little bit awkward, because some of the things I'm excited about are like truly fixes. Right?
So let me start actually by saying because we're going to talk about a few things that are coming. But one of the things that I'm excited about building not actually the product. It's about building a culture that delivers on its promises.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that has been true over the last 3 or 4 months since I've been here is we haven't been out making a lot of promises about what we're going to do other than we're going to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a big promise.
It's
Okay.
the under construction sign.
It's a big promise to say we're going to fix it. And we are going to fix it. I actually have a huge amount of belief that we're going to fix it because the progress we've made under the hood over the last 3 to 4 months has been fairly remarkable. It hasn't been seen out in the world yet, but we're getting there. But one of the reasons why we're not going to rattle off the 19 things we're going to do over the rest of this year is because we want to get in the habit of making promises and keeping promises. Under promise and over deliver would be a nice place for us to be.
Yep.
With that being said, there are some things we're excited about that we're willing to talk about. How's that?
Andrew.
There you go. So I think the first thing that I'm most excited about is a new editing experience, which will be available to a small number of users in the next couple of hopefully days, maybe a week, where I think the experience that people will get is one that almost respects their content at the same level that they respect us to give us such important content. And so you'll see things like it's in a much more readable format. It's much more easily augmented, regardless of whether you clipped it, you cut it, you pasted it, you typed it in. Those are the things that you're going to be able to manipulate that content and make it work for you. Mm-hmm. And I think that will not only satisfy some of the basic expectations, but hopefully we can have a couple of those moments that are a little bit wows for people of, oh, this is so much easier. And the way I experience Evernote will, again, start to have that consistent feel to it across platforms because the editor will stand alone from the apps themselves. You'll start to see more and more expectations like that from us of setting, hey, this is how we're going to be building things in the future so that we can both offer you a better experience right now, but now iterate on it as soon as we have that. And we do kind of have an ask of all of these people who entrust us with such things, which is keep giving us that feedback. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that we want to do in establishing that culture is make the voice of the customer much more prominent in how we make decisions about which things we prioritize and how we can figure out how to satisfy both the 51% and the 49% at the same time. And so that's sort of probably the second thing I'm most excited about is to start to hear from more and more people about what are those things that are next. And we're going to disappoint a lot of people because we can't do them all at one time. But it's such an honor and it's so humbling to think about the billions of ideas that people have given us that we are entrusted to help them do important things with, that we want to find out how we can do that better too.
And you hinted at our formatting feature improvement, as well as just kind of bringing in that customer voice, which, again, as you slightly hinted at, there will be kind of opportunities for our customers to really step into the product development process with us. And that goes beyond just like beta testing. It really starts at the idea. We will be sending out more information about that very soon. So just keep an eye on your email. But also kind of going back to where you do want product feedback to be shared. Where is it that your team, engineering and product, looks for that customer voice?
So we actually go and try to mine it from every source you can imagine. So certainly we pay attention to the forums, mm-hmm. but we also do a lot of social listening from people that are out there. And more what we're doing now is trying to get more in-depth qualitative experiences with people to understand how they're using the product mm-hmm. and what they want to be able to do with the product more seamlessly. Many people have been willing to almost hack their way to building workflows on top of Evernote. Right. We should not ask you to hack a workflow. We should enable those workflows. And then the last thing that we're doing a lot better is we're using data to understand where are the pain points for people mm-hmm. that are out there. And I don't mean data in terms of like note content. I mean data in terms of when you see someone and you see a group of people and they're all moving notes a ton between notebooks. It looks like they're doing something repetitive. What is it that they're doing right there that we should actually maybe automate? So one example that I have right now is every time I tag a note with to do, it creates a Todoist for me and a link back to that note. So when I see that behavior over and over again in the data, that's some point where we should work out and figure out, look, somebody has done something to create a hack that we should enable.
Yeah, I think if you think, The voice of the customer is this multi-dimensional thing, right? We get information from the data we gather about how people use the app, which devices they're using it on, which features they're using, how often they're using them, things like that. That's one dimension of data. That's incredibly useful because that goes to the scale of our audience, right? Because we have a massive user base, and you need to be able to look at that user base in total to see how people are doing it. But actually, there's relatively little you can understand from the data other than these big, broad pictures of how people are using it. If you want to understand how a customer uses Evernote, you have to actually sit down with them and say, show me how you use Evernote. Well, that doesn't scale in the same way that the data scales, right? We have the customer support inbound area as an understanding of primarily where people are having problems. People don't call customer support saying, I'm really happy with feature X. They call
used to
with
work
problems.
on the support team, and I wish they did.
But that's another dimension of input. And the forums are another dimension. And what we're trying to do is bring that together in a way that we elevate the voice of the customer significantly within the organization. I mean, it's something we go around and shout about, but one of the changes I've made in the organization is to bump the customer experience organization up inside the hierarchy of the organization to report directly to me. And so it's at the management team level. And we're starting to see some of the effects of that rippling through the organization, where we're connecting the customer more closely into the other parts of the organization. And that's useful not just for which product pieces are we going to build, but what's working well, what's not working well, where do we have problems, where are people happy with us, where are people unhappy with us, how do we serve them best? And it's challenging because with the size of user base we have, and the fact, and go back to the 5% problem, right? There's always things that we can do better for anyone. And it's just a question of where do we focus our energy, in which order, to try to make it better for the most number of people we can make it better for.
Right. And going back to the beginning of our webinar today, you guys sharing the way that you use Evernote was so drastically different. I'm sure that I myself could tell you my process, and it would be so different. And a question that I actually pulled from the community was very similar to that of like, while you're trying to improve the product, what are some of the ways that you're going to protect those individual workflows while you're trying to double down on this basic core function?
I think our opening position on this is we have no plans to sort of explode Evernote and bring back, here is your new Evernote, completely different than it was before.
Right.
We have a thing going on at the company right now.
We've done that 5 times.
We have a thing going on at the company right now where there's a fridge that has drinks in it. So people go to the fridge to get a drink out of it, but they just changed the fridge. It's got a glass door on the front, and now the handle is on the left instead of on the right.
That has thrown me off so much.
And you just sit there and you can watch. It's a study. Watch people go up and pull on the right side of the door. It doesn't open. They go on the left side of the door. And you're like, okay. So that fridge is a little tiny representation of what it's like to use software. If we can't figure out what side the handle is on for the fridge to open it, what happens when you change something in a piece of software that you use as a part of your everyday routine? It's very hard for our brain. It's very easy for our brains to learn new things. It's very hard for our brains to rewire things we already know how to do. And so really, first and foremost, this is not about how do we blow up the Evernote experience and bring back a new one. This is about how do we make the Evernote experience you have today work better, faster, more reliably, and get out all the sharp edges that you cut yourself on right now. Then I think we can get to how do we figure out how to surface the features that you use more often in a way that makes sense for you and also makes sense for you, understanding that the two of you use completely different Evernotes, even though they're the same product. That's a hard problem, but it's one that we're going to take on and try and solve.
I'm sure everyone that's joining us here right now is very happy to hear.
People don't use Evernote because it's the simplest product on the market.
Yeah.
People use Evernote because they can make it do what they want it to do and what they need to do. They use Evernote because it's powerful. I believe it's possible to be simpler than we are and still be powerful. but I don't think we win ultimately by dumbing Evernote down. I think we win by bringing Evernote to you more easily than we do today.
Anything to add on there?
I don't think I have anything to add on to that.
Okay.
I just have sort of been looking at some of the comments as they've come in over this time.
And you can see something I can't.
And, it's my only advantage in this world. So I think the one thing, there are lots of great questions that are in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we want to get into too many of the specifics around spaces and questions about how would we work with Zapier and so forth. Because we want to commit to we want to deliver on the promises we made to you. So the thing I guess I want to talk about is the thanks that I have to the people who are listening right now, right? Because as frustrated as you guys are, I can tell you we are probably just as frustrated with what's happened on many of these things. And so many people, I hear the story of, I either, I get frustrated with you guys, but then I remember how valuable it is. And we're so really grateful for that willingness to stick with us for these things and give us a little bit of time. And I think we can return the favor to you, hopefully tenfold in our ability to finally meet some of those expectations that people have.
Yeah.
Look, the internal rallying cry at the company right now is let's take Evernote back to where it belongs. And I can't think of anything that's probably closer to what most of our users would like us to do. And, they'd like us to go back to innovating at the speed that we used to without, destroying the Evernote that they depend on today.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're trying to do is it's not really a balancing act between those two things. It's just a question of being aware that you can do one without being at the cost of the other. But right now, what that cost is patience while we try to fix these basics that we all know. I mean, you can't talk to a dedicated Evernote user who's familiar with the app and not start a conversation with, tell me what annoys you about the app. And they have a list.
It's always, I love Evernote, but
I call it the hug and bug, actually.
And that's great, right? What's great is people care enough to actually be angry with us sometimes.
Right.
And what they deserve in return, what the community deserves in return is our paying attention to that and doing something about it.
Yes. And I see a lot in these Q&A, and we are going to open up Q&A here in just 1 second. A lot of them are very feature specific. And I think, and you can back me up on this, Andrew, every single feature that I've seen mentioned in this Q&A and in the chat are already on the table, and ones that we're looking at how we can improve from, security level, a usability level, and not necessarily an answer to give at this moment. But one that, as a member of the community, you are in the first wave of individuals that are welcomed into our alpha testing, our beta testing, and you are the first to know. So it will come.
We are going to be shipping a lot of stuff in the second half of this year, and there are going to be a lot of previews and a lot of betas and a lot of public betas, and there's definitely going to be opportunity to give us feedback in the process. Right now, we're a little bit hunkered down while we work on all of that, with really the first one of those started to come out in the next couple of weeks around the editing experience, where we're not going public beta. We're not there yet. We're going to a small group of people out from the community and trying to figure out, are we heading on the right track with this thing that we have right now?
Yep. All right. We have our own personal Vanna White, Shelby, behind the camera here. She's going to help us with a few Q&As.
Yeah. So the first question, I'm going to summarize some of these because they're a little bit longer. I believe we've got the competitors. So we know we're kind of fixing the basics, but there are a lot of people that have kind of come into the space. Again, to your comment about kind of features, I think it's a little bit more of how are we thinking about them? Are we going to be on par with some of these experiences that these other competitors might have? And where do we kind of think about them in that broader landscape?
So the question was how we're approaching competitors in the same space. So my guess is Notion, Bear, the big old OneNote that's standing behind us.
So I think there's a couple of different kinds of competitors in the space, and one is the set that's come in from the collaboration standpoint, and Google, Microsoft, et cetera. And the other is sort of a set of startups who've been tackling the space that we've created. I think the fact of the matter is that, for better or worse, and it is mostly for worse, we've left the door open in the space for the last couple of years because we haven't been innovating at the speed that we should have been innovating at for all the reasons we've been talking about. And when you leave the door open, people see opportunity. We've clearly demonstrated the category is real and the category exists.
Right.
And so the good news about this, I think, is that we're seeing competitors, particularly in the startup areas, with a strong point of view about what this space might be about. And I think those points of view are interesting. I don't think they're the point of view that we're going to have going forward necessarily. So I don't think it's about, how do I go herring off after competitor number one? I think we're going to carve our own path at the end of this year and the beginning of next year. And I think that path is relatively in sync with where most of our users are today and what they're really looking for in an app. I'm not going to talk a lot about what that path is because that gets into the making promises that we have to deliver on.
Yeah. In the next episode.
In the next episode, we will get there. But that's sort of my point about my point of view on competition is I think it's great that there are companies with different points of view. I don't think it's great that we've created some of the space that's allowed those companies to flourish, but that's on us, and now we're doing what we need to do something about that.
And we haven't prevented customers from using the benefits of the other products. Is one of the biggest things that I like to drive home about Evernote likes to play well with others. We could have looked at Microsoft and been like, all right, buddy, you're going to try and come at us, but we know that our customers use Microsoft, they use Google, they use Apple. Why shouldn't we step up and build integrations so that it's just a customer workflow that is custom made to that individual? Even looking at Zapier and IFTT, we are the most used zapped product on Zapier. And I think that that's beautiful just because people do need to have unique help in life. And we are kind of helping build that road for them.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think things like IFTTT and Zapier, they do point some of the way for us because while I think it's fantastic that people can do this, that's a lot to ask, a user other than the most dedicated N% user to go and master that tool, use it with our tool to achieve their end. I think it's great that they can do that. I'm very happy to allow that. And that's a way that we can learn about things. But in some cases, some of the most common things people are using those tools to do kind of point the way for things that we should just make that easier in Evernote.
Right.
Like triggering a note when you walk into a meeting. I don't know how many integrations you need to actually go.
Not rocket science. Not rocket science.
All right, Shelby.
So I think just time-wise.
Yep, we probably have time for one more question, guys.
So are there any plans to improve customer service experience? And I guess going to your point before, but how are we going to bring in more of that voice of the customer in product decision-making and things like that?
So the question was how Evernote is going to improve the customer service and support experience for a customer.
I think a couple of things. One, as I said, organizationally, we're trying to elevate the voice of that customer inside the organization today. That doesn't necessarily speak directly to the customer service experience. One of the challenges we have in customer service is the number of languages we have to support around the world, the number of different venues people have to us. I think one of the things we've been finding, particularly with the users who are paying us, is that support through chat is driving a significantly more satisfied customer base than support through email. You get to have your problem solved faster. You sort of go back and forth and resolve something more quickly. And that's something we're seeing across multiple territories, not on a global basis. And so that's something that we've actually been investing in over the last 4 months or so, is new platforms to enable us to do that. And as usual, this is a place where we are guided by the data. And, the data clearly shows us that that's driving customer satisfaction around the support experience. And that's something we'll be continuing to do more of.
Great. So there's a lot of questions here, and I wish we could sit here for another hour and answer them all. I think what I will do, because this is probably some of the most questions you guys have submitted in a webinar, which is really great. I will work to try and get some of these questions responded to and sent back to you guys, just directly to the community. But otherwise, I think that we're out of time today.
We could end on one thing of,
Okay.
just, I guess, kind of each of you sharing what your commitment to the users is going to be in this next year.
That's a great place to end. So the question, or just kind of ending point, was, what are you guys committing to the user in 2019?
I think my mantra for the team and when we ship something is ship something you're proud of. And if we're not proud of it, that's kind of our easiest way to measure quality, is to ask the engineers if they're proud of what they built, ask the product people if they're proud of what we've devised to solve some customer's problem, ask the marketing team if they're proud of what we've been able to do to put it in the right hands, the right customers at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't tell you that you will always love everything that we build, but I can tell you that we will do our very best to be proud of the things that we put in front of you for the first time in a while.
And I think from my standpoint, look, the users, the community, our partners, they are what makes this company work. And ultimately, over the last 10 years, it's been a bit of a meandering road from time to time, but we've gotten to a place where we have this enormous obligation and this enormous privilege to serve our users. And the best way I know how to do that is to stop making promises we don't deliver on,
Mm-hmm.
and instead start focusing on the stuff that really seems to matter. And I think one of the things you'll see from this organization this year is a degree of focus in delivering on the commitment that I made at the beginning of the year, that we are really going to try to fix the foundations of Evernote, and that the users will see that in multiple ways. They'll see it because they'll see a more coherent experience. Yes, they'll see it because eventually they'll see us be able to innovate faster. And when we ship, we'll ship across all platforms at the same time, not one at a time. And they'll see it because they just have a faster, more reliable experience. And that's actually, for 2019, that would be a pretty awesome accomplishment for Evernote.
Well, that's a great place to stop. Just one last comment from the community, from Barry Ross. He says, overall, keep up the great work. Love the direction and priorities I heard today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today.